I played Caliban in Washington, D.C. And, Caliban, for those who don't know, is a slave. He is explicitly a slave in Shakespeare's The Tempest. And, my costume, I literally had chains on me, you know what I mean? And I knew going in like, oh boy, this is going to be really interesting. But I was the one in the rehearsal room who was like, yeah, man, like whip me around, throw me around, like do whatever you want, like abuse me. Let's go for it 100%. Everyone else was very afraid of it. And then later on, people who don't know the plot, Caliban, this pitiful slave is, he meets these two wacky characters who are basically clowns, and he ends up worshiping them as like gods to save him, essentially. And so I'm like kissing this white man's foot on stage. We had high school matinees where you had these black kids from DC, Washington, DC public schools who were just like, oh, and I'm like, you know what, man, but that's in the play. That's what the script is. And I can't stop whatever baggage people are going to bring to it. And people still complained. Rather than me playing one of the great roles in Shakespeare and doing it well, I have the receipts. People complain that I can't believe that they have this black man here in DC playing a slave, ignoring the fact that there was another black male actor in the cast who was playing the son of the King of Naples, who we thought was dead, which means this nigga is now the King of Naples. He's royalty. He's royalty. And they're like, but he's like, there's a scene in The Tempest where Prospero, the main wizard, character, forces this prince to, just do menial slave labor just to test, who he is. And, because he wants to court off his daughter. It's one of those old Shakespeare plays. And I'm like, you have this black man playing a slave and this other black man who's also doing slave work. I'm like, he's the king. He's the king right now. But you're ignoring that because all you see is black people. So I release myself from this pressure to be a certain type of way for an audience. But on top of that, there's the question of skill set and this idea of this myth that, black men only get seen for certain types of roles. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, I speak a certain way. I learned how to do Shakespeare. I learned how to handle, complex texts. And those skills, they fan outward. So if you know how to if you can work your way through Hamlet or Cymbeline, one of Shakespeare's later plays, which is really fucking weird, you can pick up a piece of legal jargon from a procedural or a medical procedural and activate it and make it interesting, And so when I hear people come to me be like, man, black people, they're not getting seen in these roles. I'm like, well, have you worked on your skill set and have you made yourself more hireable? But I found myself in this weird position now where I really feel like a diversity hire. And it's not because I have the chops and the experience. I can do Oscar Wilde. I can do Shakespeare. I can do Chekhov. I can do August Wilson. I can do on-camera work. I can do a Broadway musical. I have these skills and this versatility. But you're only hiring me here because you wanted to have the picture of a black person on stage. I was working on a show that was supposed to go to Broadway, where my character was a humpback, and I totally, Francis will get this. I totally went like Richard III on. I was like, and the director was like, maybe not so much, but maybe it's more psychological. And I said, okay. And then he said. And he goes, well, Clifton, he was British. I'm going to do a really bad accent right now. But he just said, he's like, it might be that in this era, people might view your skin color as a handicap. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? It's this weird... And they chased me so hard for this role. And at that moment, I began to realize, oh, wait a minute. So they have my friend who's playing the servant maid, who's a black woman, who's a very dynamic performer. And she's down here in Atlanta with me, actually. A Broadway caliber performer. But then you said, holy shit, we have a black woman playing the maid. I guess we better have a black guy to play the master of the estate. And in that moment, I felt like, okay, at the time, I made my Broadway debut in a play called, you may have heard of it, called The Play That Goes Wrong. And I'm doing...
Yeah. It's a British farce.
It's a British farce, right? So
darling, I do know theatre.
Yeah, see, there we go. You're just as gay as I am, Francis. But so they brought it over to Broadway, and then they replaced the original British cast with an American cast. And so I'm doing every night. I'm literally, doing upper crust, standard British. I'm doing the accent, And I've had so much practice doing it, and yet it's not that I have that skill set, that I have this sort of dramatic darkness, and I have this, baritone voice, and I have a great blend of vulnerability and danger and humor that I can bring into a role. It's it's this black guy. It's not that I have years of experience and dedication in this, and again, I say I take pride in it. People look down on actors, and I understand why, but there are those of us out there who just genuinely enjoy what we do, and we enjoy performing for audiences, and there's a process and a craft that goes into it. And when you study for a long time to become good at it, at great personal and financial sacrifice, by the way. I mean, I could be married by now, I could have children by now, but we both wanted to be actors. And so we decided to go our separate ways. I've given up so much, and for you to tell me that I'm only here, because you wanted somebody who's, there's another show that they wanted to see me for a Broadway replacement, the musical, and the conversation, as was relayed to me by my manager, literally was, we should have a black guy playing this role. So the consideration isn't, here's someone who could bring something dynamic and interesting and fresh to this romantic lead. No, it's time for a black person to have this. Here, take this, darky. You deserve this. Here's a pat on the head. And that's how it feels. So it's this very weird thing where it's like, I have the skill set and the craft and the chops to do these things you're asking me to do, but I feel like in many ways I'm only being asked to do these things so that white progressives can feel better about themselves. And it's really condescending, as you might imagine.